Well, welcome to the Afterburn podcast. This is episode 7, and it's my first in-person podcast with Dennis Mellon. I met Dennis Mellon over 8 years ago at Lifetime, and he is a wealth of knowledge. I know you're going to love this. Let's get into it. Dennis Mellon. So good to have you, man.
Happy to be here.
This is great. This is my first in-person podcast for what I'm doing now with the channel. So really grateful that we live in the same city and be able to come down and thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Definitely honored.
I would not miss it. I'm glad you invited me on. It was great.
Well, we met, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've been with Lifetime going on 10 years now. It's been a while. And I met you at Lifetime. So it's got to be almost the same. Like we've got at least 9 years we've known each other, or something like that.
Close to that.
Somewhere around
8 or 9
right?
years?
Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, and I just want to share, again, I want you to share with everybody a little bit about your background, but I want to start by just saying I remember meeting you there at Lifetime and going into one of your classes and taking a power class. And I think you were the first power class I ever took. And I felt like I was going, like I was in a classroom. In fact, I was like, this guy's like a professor here. Like and I'm like one of those people that love to learn. And you opened up basically a world for me of indoor cycling that I now have on the channel too, like Power Zone classes that I fell in love with, Right. And so I just have to thank you for that. But for those who don't know you, would you just share a little bit about yourself too?
Sure. So my name's Dennis Mellon, and I originally grew up in upstate New York, up by West Point, so about 40 miles north of New York City. Kind of active my whole life, and I coached kids for the longest time. From right after I finished Little League, I started coaching the younger kids. So kind of loved that.
For baseball? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was mostly baseball, but I coached other sports as well. But baseball was always my love with that. So I decided when it was time to go to college that I was going to be a phys ed teacher.
Okay.
So I'm like, all right. So I went to a school in upstate New York called SUNY. It's one of the state schools in New York State, SUNY Cortland, which had a top-of-the-line phys ed program. They're really, if you live in New York, every single school in the state of New York probably has a graduate from Cortland, because they were known for phys ed, but they were also, it's a teacher's school.
Gotcha.
So I went into that thinking, yep, I'm going to end up, being a phys ed teacher, coach 3 sports every season, and I was going to kind of do that for my life. But when I graduated, or right as I was graduating, they were losing jobs. There weren't that many teaching jobs available. So I kind of went and talked to my counselor, and she's like, I think you should do some exercise physiology classes, and which we did anyway, but she said, make a focus on that because you may want to jump into fitness until you decide to get a teaching job afterwards. So I did that. And after graduating, I got a job in New York City, which was an amazing way to finish school, right? I finished school, got this job in New York City at this place called the Sports Training Institute. Doesn't exist anymore, but it was the first personal training studio in New York City. They had their own training plan and training program for the instructors, but also a certain way to train. So I liked that. That kind of stuck with me going into what I've done with indoor cycling and being an educator for cycling. So I did that for a few years and then decided I needed to kind of make a move. And that's when I moved to Colorado, had some fraternity brothers.
What year was that?
That would have been, I graduated in 91. That would have been 94.
Okay.
So I worked in New York City for about 3 years and then packed up and drove across the country and moved to New York City, moved to Colorado.
Yeah.
My first job in a facility here was at Greenwood Athletic Club, which was one of the top clubs in the city at that time. That was long before Lifetime was even a thing out here. Lifetime was just up there in Minnesota. Yeah, they had nothing to do with Colorado.
Clubs were the thing before Lifetime was even thought of around here in Colorado.
And interesting, I was at Greenwood Athletic Club only for about 8 months. And in that time, the general manager went to URSA. This was 95, I believe. And that's when Johnny G released or launched spinning.
Okay.
So that was the launch or the birth.
For those who don't know what URSA is, what?
So URSA is it's the big trade show where all of the equipment manufacturers, as well as program creators, launch their products.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they went to URSA. The general manager, who is a great guy, a fantastic athlete, took this class with this guy, Johnny G, came back after URSA and said, we're getting spinning here at Greenwood Athletic Club. We want to be the first club in Colorado to get it. And I was one of the people that they wanted to get trained.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. And, I really wanted to do something. I was doing personal training at the time, but I was trained in school to deal with groups and coach and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this will be pretty cool. So I can get back into the group setting, because I was never going to do step aerobics or any kind of dance like that.
Yeah.
So this was like my way back into that thing. And then I happened to get another job. So I left before I got certified there. The job was in fitness. So I went to another athletic club. I was the fitness director. So as soon as I got hands on a budget, I brought spinning to that facility.
Nice.
So that would have been like 96. So I got certified in 96, and I've been teaching indoor cycling since then.
You were in when it first started.
I was a year afterwards. Yeah. It's that long.
And probably one of and I don't know the history of it either. I started teaching, I think in 2009, 2010, something like that. But with that said, you may have even been one of the first facilities in Colorado to start a larger program, right? With Colorado Athletic Club being such a bigger facility. Like, did they start with a lot of bikes, or what did that look like?
I mean, back in those days, some facilities decided, that's back in the days when there were still a lot of racquetball courts around.
Yeah.
So a lot of
pickleball courts,
right? And maybe they should have kept them, right? Maybe they should have kept the racquetball courts. So everybody just turned racquetball courts into cycling studios.
Gotcha.
But what we did at my facility was...
That might have been challenging with like the echo in the room, right?
Oh, it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we were talking about what I've seen with clubs. Greenwood came in and redid well, actually, let me take that back. Their first facility was in a racquetball club, was in a racquetball court. They painted the walls and put up some flags, and it echoed a bit.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly they did a full conversion.
Okay.
And you may not even realize that it's racquetball courts. I still teach there. So you may not even realize that it was racquetball courts.
So is that the same? Is that the same place when you walk in and there's the glass? That was a conversion,
right? Well, the glass. The only thing that really looks like a racquetball court is it still has the glass door.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense now.
That you would walk in.
Because I always love the fact that one of the things where I'm at in Lifetime is that our cycle studio is like hidden in the back corner of the building. And one of the things I've always loved about Colorado Athletic Club is you come up the stairs, you go in there, and you see all the bikes right there through the glass. Like, talk about promoting, the program.
Oh, it's right there. And different, I know we're kind of talking about different things, but what I love about that, I've taught in, I've taught regularly in a bunch of different studios, but then being this master educator that I am at Stages, I've probably seen hundreds of other studios. Some people like the studios to be dark and black walls and nothing, you can't see anything, turn the lights off and ride. Greenwood is just all windows, and kind of enjoy the light that you get in there, especially in the morning when the sun rises. There's something nice about that. I know I don't really pick or choose what's good or bad. It's just nice that it's different. It is nice that it's bright. You're riding in a bright
the environment.
It
is what it is.
I do like that. I mean, I also like having a darker studio once in a while too, to play with lights and things like that. But when we first started at this other studio that I started working at, we used the group exercise room.
Okay.
So we're wheeling bikes up, setting them up where you wanted, wheeling them back. It just wasn't set up for indoor cycling, but most people now are setting up these individual rooms that are just set for cycling. And eventually we created a room in that studio, in that facility to have the bike stay and to make it its own little place.
That's amazing.
So we just kind of renovated basically an open space.
Sure.
And just put glass walls around. So that was just, it's seeing the transition and the growth, and then some would say the kind of the downfall and the growth again of indoor cycling has been fun to be part of.
Yeah. One of the things that I say once in a while during my classes online is I'll say, we don't call it spinning, we call it indoor cycle, right? And so, but you're calling it spinning because you were there at the birth of the person who called it spinning, like the actual brand.
Right.
And then, so those of you who are listening, like when you hear somebody say, like, I want to take a spinning class, or you Googled and you found this because you put like spinning, that's what it's known for. Like you can't get around that word anymore.
Right.
As much as we want to say that's a brand, it's still what people will, I think, forever are going to say. Do you teach spin? Is there a spinning class? And as much as I've tried to say it's indoor cycle, that's a brand, and maybe that's just lifetime deprogramming us or whatever.
Trying to.
But it's always going to be known as a spin class. Do you agree? Do you think?
I do. I mean, I call it indoor cycling as well, but spinning comes up and we're kind of talking about actual spinning there because I was Johnny G spinning certified. So it still comes up. I try not to get too caught up in that. So many people got so concerned about that. And, I did get an email once of don't call it spinning anymore. You're not a spinning instructor. Because I let that cert go as I was doing other things. I'm like, really? Just promoting indoor cycling? That big of a deal? So it is funny when those things come up and when people are, don't call it spinning.
Yeah, there was a season for me too where I got a little anal about it. What is spinning? What are you even talking about? Just just being kind of silly with it. And now I'm just like, you know what? If they find me because spinning, or somebody asks, do you teach spin? I'm just gonna say yes.
Right.
I'm not gonna correct every person when it's ingrained in everybody that's just what it's called, or what they heard it was called, or whatever.
Well, when someone says, can I have a Kleenex? I don't say, oh, it's a tissue. I'm like, here, have it. You can have it. So I think everyone knows that spinning should be proud of that.
Yes.
Not try to cut that off.
Yeah. And I think it kind of came from them, like, don't call it our brand.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. I got you.
Trademark stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Both you and I love technology. We love sound. Tell me a little bit about, like, since you kind of started from the ground up in these facilities, I'm sure that, the first place that you taught didn't have the greatest microphone and setup or whatever. Like, will you walk me through like what that looks like and what it looks like, or what it looked like then, and then what you do today? Because I know today we have microphones, we have speakers, we have compressors, we have all these things that make it sound nice. Right. But what was that like in the early days?
Yeah. Well, the first studio that I taught in was a group exercise studio. Okay. So they had a stereo. They had a good sound system. Okay. They had a great mic. So they had a wireless mic. So that wasn't uncomfortable. But the stereo was behind me, so I always had to reach back to make any adjustments to it, or get up off of my bike and make those changes. But what I think most, and I've been on some of these social media groups where we kind of talk about, walking uphill in the snow both ways in the first days of indoor cycling. But when it started, we had to make tapes, like cassette tapes, for our music. So you have to have
like a mixtape, or
it was a mixtape. Okay. Yep, it was like an old style mixtape that you weren't giving your girlfriend. You were actually, you actually had to do it, and it took a long time to create those. Everyone had to have a dual tape deck. You were pulling. I mean, you're trying to edit that stuff now. We think about what we have today with Spotify and Apple Music and how
crossfades,
how everything is so easy to do it. And you pick it and you play it. We had to create it. So then you had to create tapes. So it's also cassette tapes. So audio wasn't super good on those, and you probably recorded it 3 or 4 times. So that song wasn't coming full quality.
It's like a third or fourth generation.
Like the tape you bought at Tower Records or something, which doesn't even exist anymore. You weren't really using that one. You're using the mixtape you made last class, and so and then it would get caught. Then it would get eaten, and you'd be in the middle of class, and so that was always that was
for those of you who like were in our era of cassettes, and you totally heard that noise right now. Like I heard that eating. Yeah.
Exactly. And you're running, trying to save it. So we had to create tapes.
Okay.
And you'd walk in with your cassette case, your cassette tape case, that was your thing. That was your baby. And gosh, I remember when people would say they got stolen or something, like someone's car would get broken in. That was like 100 hours worth of work that got stolen. So,
my God.
So we had that to deal with, which was fine. It was fun. It was no different than what it was when we were little kids trying to record music off the radio and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then they had CDs.
Okay.
So some people would program the turnstile CDs. They'd put in like 6 or 7 CDs, and they'd sit there and program it before class. So, when people say now, I don't want to get to class 10 minutes early, well, you have to be there half an hour earlier before to set those up and to do that.
So they would program a playlist with a multiple CD player.
And imagine how long the crossfade or the lack of crossfade time it takes to change
totally.
song.
The song ended, right? And you probably even heard the the little mechanical thing.
You think about how we have it now. It's really, really, it's amazing. So CDs, and you could burn CDs. Then MP3 players started to come out. And I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming in. I remember thinking about the convergence of technology.
Okay.
And I used to walk into class with my Palm Pilot, which I would write on, my flip phone, which I could talk on, and then an MP3 player.
Okay.
So I would, with a piece of tape or with a rubber band around it, because here's all my technology.
Yeah.
And the MP3 players only saved like 15 or 20 songs. You had to change those each time if you're going to use them. So now we have
not a lot of memory from the early days.
Yeah. But what else we had there was you mentioned it. If you went to another room that was like a racquetball court, yes, it was incredible echo. You had to really deal with that and manage that.
It's tough.
It was fatiguing, and the lighting was either bright or off. There wasn't like a middle ground.
Yeah.
Moving the bikes back and forth was always interesting. And gosh, in those old days, we had the brake pads that gave resistance, and they would squeak and be loud, and you'd spray WD-40 or something on to smell the whole room. So I don't know. I never look back at those days as bad, because that was like the heyday. Everyone was excited to be doing something new. They were happy to be there. You're using your music to create this journey and this experience. Some places didn't have mics, so you lose your voice trying to scream or yell over the music and all. But I don't know. Those days were great.
Super cool.
Yeah.
I love, so I didn't know that about like you as far as the music history behind it. Mm-hmm. And it totally makes sense, because when I take a class of yours, whether it's online or at B-Ride where your studio is, and I want you to share a little bit about that too. Your music is just so on point. Like not only is it like as clear as it could be, sometimes you use video, but you're able to map it like nobody's business, and you're so good at that. And what I mean by mapping, for those of you who maybe didn't know what I mean by that, but we get the song, right, and every song has like an introduction, it has a verse, has a chorus, has a bridge, and you have like this beautiful way of taking us through this journey, whether it be anywhere from country music to pop to, maybe an EDM song, and you just flow with it. And so it's totally makes sense that if you had to go through the pain of making a mixtape, like it makes sense why music is such a big thing. I mean, talk to me a little bit about music and how it relates to your class.
So I still have my original tape.
Man.
I wish I would
wrap that.
And some of the songs on it I still use. Like "Come On Eileen" was on that original tape. It was, those days. I remember in my very first training. So it was a Johnny G spinning training. And they were called master educators, right? I think so. Master instructors, maybe, whatever it was. I forget what everyone has kind of this name for it. And I think, I think Joe probably feels the same way I do, is that I'm just going to teach you how to teach an indoor cycling class. Don't call me a master or anything. I don't need that. I just, but she liked, and in the early days of spinning, they got into like drums and and like the new age music that you would hear in like in a candle shop or something like that. If so, she was out of Boulder, and she was a little, you know, a little artsy, little that way. And she said, and this was probably the best advice I ever got on how to use music in an indoor cycling class.
Okay, give it to us.
And she just said, you may like a certain genre, but don't ever make a class one genre all the way through. She goes, I could sit here and listen to this, you know, this coffee house type of music and set a class up to it. And that's what I like to listen to, but I know not everyone else does that.
Sure.
So I've always tried to mix genres as much as possible with the idea of, or the thought of, you might not like all the songs, but as long as you have one song in that class that is absolutely your jam, then you've taken care of everybody that's in that class. So so when she said that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to mix all the genres I can. I'll try to keep doing that, and also try to be a fan at some way of all the genres. Like there may be a genre you don't like. There's got to be a song in that genre that you like that you could sell. So then bring that one in, right? Or sometimes just kind of deal with a song that's not your favorite, but you know other people are loving it, or it's popular at the time, or things like that.
Yeah, because it could be hard. Like there's times where people will, you know, a member will come up and say, hey, can you play this song? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I just don't feel connected to it.
Right.
And it's so hard to be passionate about something that you're not connected to. But I love that you're saying, hey, maybe you might be connected to 80%, maybe not those, but let's still appeal to more people. Right. I like that. One of the things that I love about music as it relates to indoor cycling and creating classes is that there's two things that happen. And again, correct me what you think, but indoor cycling, spinning, it's for everybody, first of all. And so you can have a teenager all the way to, I have a few members that go to my class that are 83, 84 years old. Love it.
Yeah.
So you have like this wide range of ages, and that allows you for music essentially to never get old.
Right.
So you can literally, like, it's not like top 40 where it falls off the end. We don't hear that song anymore. It's literally, I can do 80s, you know, a few 80s songs. I could do 70s. I could do 60s. I could do the most modern stuff. I could do country. I could do pop. I could do rock. I could do ballads, whatever. And it's like a place, a room where music will never die.
Right.
Do you think that's that?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think about that?
I think that's, you bring back an old song. I used to get, I haven't heard this in a while, but I used to play some stuff. I'm a classic rock guy, but I will play everything, and I love country as well. But it's nice when you play something and someone says, wow, that brought me back.
Yes.
You know, because we have some older members, right? Something from their high school. Gosh, I'm an older member now. So, you know, and they're like,
we're all getting there, right?
And they're like, wow, that one really brings me back. And, you know, then they thank you. And it's just a song you chose because you like it. And you figure, I'm going to try this. And then all of a sudden it's like, they light up.
Yeah.
Even if it's like a recovery song that's just, you know, had touched them in some way in their life.
Right.
So, and
takes them back.
That's the beauty of music.
And that's the thing too, because now we have the option to play that original track, right, that took them there. Or there's a lot of remixes, or what they call reboots now, where they'll take, you know, a song. And I think, you know, I came to the conclusion, I've lived long enough to where kids are hearing things that I grew up on, and they think it's modern, but it's just a remix of what we used to listen to in middle school, high school, right?
Let me interrupt on that.
Yeah,
this just came to me. I play a remix, or it's a mashup of Smoke on the Water.
Okay.
Or Smoke on the Water is part of the mashup. Okay. Right.
Gotcha.
So my kids have just heard that, because I've played that, you know, since they were 5 years old or so, because they've come to classes with me and all, and I played in the car. Well, when they heard the original Smoke on the Water, they said they ruined it. I'm like, no, that's it.
No, that is it.
That's the original. They didn't ruin it at all. The other ones, some people would say ruined it. So, but it's interesting that everything gets a new life.
Yeah.
You know, and that idea of cycling and then music. And then when Johnny G spinning first came out, we had no heart rate monitors, were just coming out at that point. Power meters may have existed in a lab, but they weren't anything that anyone would use in a studio.
Sure.
So we only had our voice, our music, and maybe we didn't even have a way to see what your RPM was. You had to count it out or try to match it.
So
was
it mainly just filling based at that point?
Yeah.
And following the beats per minute, the BPMs. Okay.
So what you learned as a Johnny G instructor was you were creating a journey. You were taking people on a ride.
Okay.
So think of yourself as being outside on this journey. And you're picking music that would feel like a flat road, that would feel, maybe not even have the correct beats per minute. Because if you look at the beats per minute, sometimes there's some songs that don't match those beats per minute or RPMs that we use. And then you have a higher energy song to stand and reach to the top of the hill.
Sure.
They did interval training as well, but the idea of the journey was always there, and the music brought you there. Other people would be great at explaining what a journey would be, could help you visualize the journey. That wasn't something I was ever great at.
Okay.
And I never felt real authentic doing that. So I always let the music do it.
Yeah.
I just say, we're on a hill, hear it. And they would, oh yeah, say we do. So,
well, that totally makes sense, because now I know where the roots of some instructors come from, because they will be like, hey, we're on a mountain, or we're heading to Estes Park, or like they have all these these imaginary things that they say. So that makes sense that if that's the early version, or that's the early instruction on how to do it, then that's where the roots came from. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. You mentioned not having any kind of measurement. Today we have consoles on a lot of our bikes. We have power meters, and there's at least 3 different ways to teach, and I'll mention them and let's talk about it. I'd love to. There's probably more than that, but for the most part, instructors who do what we do, there's what we use, a RPE, like a range of perceived exertion, scale from 1 to 10. It should feel like this, right? You should be able to hang on for this long, whatever that might be. And then we have heart rate training that you just mentioned. For the most part, people use a five zones, anywhere from easy to your max heart rate. And then you have power zone training, which came later, right? And I'm not sure how much later. I haven't done a ton of I teach it, and I should know a little bit more about the history. Maybe you could share a little bit about that. But there's basically those primary ways of teaching, right? Talk to me about each one, and what you love most, or which one you love most. I have a feeling I know which one it is.
Right.
Just for our audience, I'd love to hear that.
Right. Well, when I was in college, I was lucky enough. There's a gentleman. His name is Dr. Jack Daniels. Whenever I say that, people like, oh, like the drink. Yeah, it's spelled and everything, just like Jack Daniels, but he's not. That's not him. He
different Jack.
He's a different Jack. Yes. And they call him the godfather of running. So he was really considered still considered one of the top running coaches ever.
Wow.
And he coached Olympians and gold medalists. And where I really thought he was so special was I was at a small Division III school, and he was an exercise physiologist there, and the cross-country coach and the track coach. So Division III athletes are usually just above average athletes. Right? I'm not knocking Division III athletes.
No.
But they're not. They're not D1. They're doing other things. They're not D1. So they're good, but they're definitely not the top. Good. So coaching there has a big importance to being successful. So you have all these athletes that are decent, that are good athletes. I mean, they're definitely a college athlete. But he would win national championship after national championship in the Division III, the Division III area of the NCAA with average athletes. So when I see that, the way I look at that is that's coaching.
Yeah.
Right. You're not just out there NIL deal and getting the best athletes to come and then say, I'm coaching the best runner. I'm the best coach because I'm coaching the best runners. And you have the best talent.
Yes.
This guy would get pretty average athletes and win national championships with them. So what he was doing was working. And he talked a lot about, because I took a few classes with him and it was just brilliant. Like, it's like talking to at the time, the most respected running coach in the world was in the small Division III school. Wow. And he took running and broke it up into zones like that. So yes, he talked about heart rate, but he's like, heart rate varies. And, And, you know, if the kids were out drinking the night before or didn't get enough sleep or studying and they're dehydrated or drinking a bunch of coffee, the heart rate's going to be all over the place.
Okay.
So he talked a lot about pacing, the same way we would talk about power, right? So, you know, whatever your speed is for this, that's this zone. So he would set up zones for all of these runners according to their pace or their mile pace or something like that. So they would know if they ran 400 meters, what zone they were in as they're kind of going through that pace. So this is probably a little bit deeper than we could have gone. But so everything was output based, not this is what your heart rate says, so this is where you are.
The heart rate response of what's happening.
So this is whatever you're doing, this, and then this is the zone. So as you improved, you would run faster. And as you ran faster for a mile, all your zones would go up, not just your mile pace or things like that. So then he knew how fast you should run for a 400, for a half mile, for a full mile. And then he set it all up to run marathons. So he could really figure it out. If you did a mile at this speed, with enough training, this would be your time in a marathon.
And that's kind of like what we do in power, right?
Exactly.
Keep
so
telling
that's
me
where it
the
was.
story.
So, but you had to do the training to go that long. So that would, but he could definitely predict what you should do in a marathon by this idea. So in a way, this was before power meters and things like that. I kind of took that pace. He called it V dot, if anybody wants to look it up. So I took that, and as we kind of worked our way into indoor cycling, because I kind of started teaching cycling pretty soon after that, we had heart rate monitors. And I'm like, all right, that's cool, but it drifts and all. And the problem I found with heart rate monitors is not everyone brings them. So if you're trying to teach a heart rate based class and only a quarter of the class has heart rate monitors, it's hard to teach, and you're really not going to do this thing and check your arteries and all.
It's not realistic.
But heart rate's cool. It's if you have no other option for it, you can do that. I actually feel perceived exertion is really, really good. I think people are really honest with where they are and how they feel. As long as an instructor, you tell them how they're supposed to feel. You give it a number. You tell them how it's supposed to feel and how long they could hold it, because they need all those things. If you just tell somebody, feel like a 3, well, a 3, and then you got to give me some information on what a 3 is supposed to feel like, or how long could I hold it. So that's one thing. I mean, you and I have both worked for Stages. I thought Cameron Shinati, who hired me at Stages and was head of education for a long time, she had this cueing thing she called the 7-layer cue cake. And it was like, you got to layer everything on top of each other. How are you supposed to feel? Give it a number. How long can you hold that? How long will it take to recover from that? Like, so you tried to cue all of these different things and then try to make it real for people. Like, you know, we live in Colorado, so we're climbing a 14er. This is how that would feel. People in Colorado probably know how that feels, but someone in Kansas probably wouldn't. So
when you say that, and let me ask you this, because I love this. When you say like that 7-layer thing, was she essentially challenging the instructor to give at least 7 different descriptors of each place they would be?
Not really. It didn't have to be 7. She had it could get very technical. But it was never just say in a class, let's go to 7. And you're like, well, 7 what? 7 perceived exertion? 7 out
or
of
7
10?
Out of what? 7 out of 100? 7 out of,
How's it supposed to feel? How's my body supposed to feel? What's it similar to? How long could you do this? You know, you wanted to give as many cues as possible. So perceived exertion comes in there. We tend to use it. I mean, back in the day, it was 18, right? The Borg, what it was. But we dropped it down to 10 just to make it more simple, to make it more reasonable so people can understand it. But I always, when I instruct with perceived exertion, which I have no problem instructing with, I think it's sometimes stuff just blows up and I got to teach perceived exertion. And I'm like, all right, I can do this. I talk a lot for like the first 15 minutes, then it's like I've taught them,
Yeah.
and now I don't have. Now I can say we're going to a perceived exertion of 7. I don't have to keep cueing it, but at first you got to cue so much to make sure everyone's on the same page as you work your way through it. So a lot of that was just layering in different things, because different language, different people speak different languages, and different things kind of stick with them. So the perceived exertion is great, but I always like the idea of, here's the perceived exertion. Then if you have a heart rate monitor, let's put a heart rate to that perceived exertion.
Yes.
So a 7 out of 10, which in our world is threshold, is your maximum sustainable intensity. It hurts, but it doesn't get worse. You breathe quickly and deeply, but you're not breathless.
Yeah.
And you can hold a 7 out of 10. What's your heart rate? Cool. We're going to go back to that. So remember that. Problem is, heart rate takes 15 or 20 seconds to ramp up, maybe longer. Yeah. So when I cue that one, I'll be like, okay, we're going to go to 7 out of 10. The interval, if it's an interval or chorus verse or whatever you're doing in the song, we're going to do this for 2 minutes. I need your heart rate to get up to that 7 out of 10 heart rate in 30 or 40 seconds. Yes. Don't rush it. Otherwise you shoot it up and you're really doing an anaerobic interval.
Yes.
Then you calm down. You really just did a heart interval for 30 seconds and you're recovering the rest of it. So slowly ramp it back up. So then you can bring those two together. So now you have the perceived exertion, then you have the heart rate.
Yes.
That you can bring in there. People start to put those things together.
Well, you're making me look a little smart, because when I have I do have a series of heart rate based training on my channel, and I always say heart rate chases effort. Like, it's gonna get there, but because I display mine, and I'm like, guys, I know, like, my effort is a zone 3, but you got to give me some time, to get there. It's not going to get there right away. So I'm always like beating that drum. Heart rate chases effort, right? And so thank you for qualifying me as a professional.
Exactly.
But I appreciate that. And then we have power zones, which you can get right to that zone. And so I've recently, I'm doing a series right now using power zones. And I would love to hear your explanation. I like to remind, to try to the best of my ability, educate my audience that, there's 7 heart rate zones. It's based off of what we would call a functional threshold power test. And that true test is 1 hour. Most people aren't going to take the 1 hour. They may take the 20. There's even a 5-minute version, 3-minute version, 1-minute version. And then we do math to be able to find out what your zones would be.
Right.
And I think one of the, and I would love for you to, give me some of your knowledge on this. One of the things that I think gets confusing for people when it comes to power zones. I mean, it is what it is. We totally get it.
Right.
But when we talk about threshold and that zone 4,
right,
that being 100% of your threshold, people get confused and they say, well, 100%, isn't that my all out, right? When it really is, no, that's what you could do for an hour.
Right.
And because I've recently had people on my channel say, well, I'm not a fan of over 100%, because I'll say, zone 5, zone 6, it's 50% over, it's, whatever over. And it's a little confusing. Like, how do you explain that? Give me because you're the professor, in my opinion. I don't love the way.
Don't know about that.
You've taught me, so much.
So I'm going to go back to Jack Daniels too, because luckily, I really comprehended what he was saying when he was coming up with the pacing for different runners. He's a run coach, so but he didn't want you always running at the same pace. Okay. I'll get back to that.
Sure.
But that is that's always happening. The idea of you can't do more than 100%, because people are thinking heart rate.
Right.
I can't do more than 100% of my heart rate. So the idea of what's your max heart rate? I mean, no one really cares what your max heart rate is, but for some reason, heart rate training started with, we're going to take 100% of your max heart rate, and then we're going to take percentages off of that to set the other zones, where we would have been better off knowing what your functional threshold heart rate is.
There you go.
And then using heart rates above and below that, and you could do more than 100% of that. I get it, and I get that it's confusing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that people are just interested
Sure.
in knowing what it is. So
Yeah.
when we think of functional threshold power, we think of 100% of your maximum sustainable intensity,
Okay.
or that point where waste accumulates in your body, in your muscles, in your blood, where you become breathless. So we want to know what that point is, what you can hold. And if I said, and that's that 7 out of 10 that we talk about.
Yes.
So you're going to 7 out of 10 and you're going to hold it, and you could hold it for an hour longer. I mean, the professional cyclists can do that for 3 or 4 hours.
Sure.
The marathon runners, they can hold their threshold right below that point where they're accumulating waste in their body for hours. Sure. That's why we're getting marathoners that are coming up on 2-hour marathons.
Yeah, because they get good at finding that threshold and developing
and then
that
improving
threshold.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
So we need to know that number. And yes, we call it 100% of your, we could change the numbers if we wanted, I guess.
Yeah.
The thing is, we don't know what the top end is. So
True.
Because there's been plenty of times, and you've probably dealt with this too, with heart rate training, where you take 220 minus your age, which is just a guess at what your max heart rate is.
Yeah.
It gets you close, and I'm not going to knock it.
Sure.
But it gets you close, but it's definitely not a real thing.
Right.
But people that have exercised for years haven't lost that 1 beat per minute or 1 beat per year that you're like 220 minus your age.
Sure.
So I have people coming up to me, maybe their max heart rate calculated is 150.
Okay.
And they're pushing 170 and they think they're going to die. Like,
Right.
something wrong with me? I'm like, no, do you usually go that hard? Yeah, my heart rate always goes above my max. Well, then that's your max, right? Then your max isn't this 220 minus your age. It's whatever you can do. So that's the idea of, instead of just taking the calculation, actually doing it, doing something.
Right.
So the idea of doing the tests that we do to calculate your FTP is nice, because we're not estimating anything. We're estimating a little bit with the math that we do, but they're actually doing it to get those numbers. So, I mean, I like that. I like that you're actually testing it. You're testing it. Everything is super duper personalized at that point. So,
and that's what I was going to say. It personalizes it for the deconditioned person and the conditioned person, and everybody gets to play along.
Right.
Yeah,
so we take 100%. It's 100% of your maximum sustainable effort. It's 100% of what you can maintain before you become breathless, before you would need to recover. But that threshold's so important, because below it you could ride for hours. So at it, an hour, a little bit more. Below it, hours and hours. But the second you cross over top of it,
and you limit.
We're talking like 5 minutes you can hold that. That's why that threshold is so important, and knowing what it is. So we know that if you work in those higher zones at 5, 6, and 7, that red, dark red, and purple, we know as instructors, and riders should know that too, that you're going there, but it's short-lived. So it's fun. It's intense. It's great. High energy. All of that is fun, but that is not something that you can do for a long period of time. So we know, when we know your threshold, how long you can hold those efforts. So then we can create personalized workouts for every single person, because the professional cyclist and the first timer can hold an above threshold effort for the same amount of time. I mean, obviously it's going to change a little bit, but generally it's going to be 5 minutes, as long as I could hold something that's above that threshold. So
I love that.
That's what makes it fun. I think that's what brings everybody together. The idea of, what this Dr. Jack Daniels really kind of taught me was, the shorter the distance, the faster or higher intensity you can go. So you can do 30 seconds, you can go all out for 30 seconds and push a lot more wattage than you can for 2 or 3 minutes. So the idea of bringing time into it, even if you're using perceived, give me your best 30-second effort, give me your best 1 minute effort. People generally know that if you're doing that, if I'm going for 30 seconds, I can do this. If I'm doing a minute, I can do this. I can't do them together. It's max for that amount of time. But he taught us that too, and everything was kind of correlated with that. If you're doing a 5-mile run, you can run it at this pace. But if you're doing a 1-mile run with repeats, you can do it faster. So it kind of just, some of those things in college, we know we do. It does kind of come together in a way that you never thought it was going to.
I love that. And I remember one of the things that really helped me understand threshold was when you'd given the illustration, if you were to turn on water, right, and it's going down the faucet, but at a certain, if you turn on the water and the pressure goes up, at a certain point, it's going to get backed up. Right. And that's where it would be like a word picture, if you will, an illustration of the threshold. Right.
The analogy of, if your threshold or your fitness level, we could even call it, is the drain.
Sure.
Your goal is to make the drain bigger and bigger. But whatever your drain is, you can, and the faucet, the water coming out of the faucet is the intensity of the work that you're doing.
Okay.
So the second you overload that, you turn the faucet on or turn the resistance up higher.
Yeah.
There's going to be more waste or water. That's kind of, we always use the analogy of water in that one is it's going to, so if you are just above what the sink can handle, it may take 5 or 10 minutes for the sink to fill up. If you crank it up like a fire hose, it might be 30 seconds. So it's kind of like the fire hose is that purple. Yeah. Right? The little bit heavier or a little bit more than that is that the dark red or that zone 6. Yeah.
So each zone, by the way, has a color to it. And so I'll put a link on this episode of where you can see what that actually looks like, because it's really cool. I used to give this analogy of, I had a friend that growing up, he was the first one out of us to have a car, but it obviously was a really cheap car. Didn't work. I think you could see through the floor and onto the ground, or it was a piece of crap, if I'm honest. And so the thing with his car was it got us around. It did what it was supposed to do, but he knew that if he went over 60 miles an hour, it was going to start to overheat. And so sometimes I would tell that story and I'm saying, all right, I want you to stay right at 55, right at 59. I don't want you to overheat, because once you overheat, that means we got to pull over on the side and
it's a perfect analogy.
It's so, I would use that every once in a while. So that's fun. Let's talk a little bit about stages. We've got a stages SC3 bike behind us, a beautiful bike. You was a master educator for them for years. I mean, in my opinion, and you tell me a little bit more about this, you really helped them. I remember meeting you. I already knew you. You went over to Stages, then later I met Javier, and just an amazing product. And you taught, again, educating for them for so long. I mean, impacting hundreds of lives with that, and their specialty being the power meter. Right. And so maybe talk a little bit about that. Anything you want to share, in that genre.
So Stages was a gentleman named Pat Warner, who was one of the, I forget all the titles. I think he was one of the presidents of Stages. He actually created that bike for Johnny G, the very first indoor cycling bike for Schwinn. They were working for Schwinn. Johnny G came out with this Schwinn bike, and Pat built it. And then since then, he's always trying to improve. Now, Pat's a world-renowned track cyclist as well. In his age group, he's the best in the world. So he has a absolute love for cycling. So they kept progressing and progressing. And when the idea of power meters started coming out, they started really making their way into like the world of fitness and cycling back when Lance Armstrong was winning all those Tour de France's, right about then when power meters were coming out. So there were different ways to measure power. Stages likes to measure it directly, like you're on a scale and you're stepping on the scale and it gives you a number and it's the work that you're actually doing. Other people would try to make their best guess at, how much of the brake was on, how what the RPM was, things like that. It was still, I'm not going to knock anything, any way to motivate people and to give people more feedback is great. Stages, though, did this direct measurement, so it was exactly what you were doing, every pedal stroke. So Pat and his team developed that. And they were with a company called Free Motion at one point. And they left Free Motion. They had built the power meter for the Free Motion bikes. And that was right before I came on at Stages. That team left Free Motion and started Stages. So Boulder, Colorado. They're all cyclists. They all had just a love and passion for cycling. And they built this power meter. That measures your output directly. So, and every pedal stroke, you get it. There's no ramp up. Every pedal stroke, you get a number, and you know exactly what you're doing every second of it.
Okay.
So it's a mix of your resistance and your RPM.
And they're typically located on the crankshaft, right?
Yep.
Of the bike.
Some of them were on the hub.
Let me grab one here. I know it's a little spontaneous, here, but I actually have a broken one right here. This is what, I don't know what generation that is, but you could kind of show us
That's a newer one, actually. So the power meter is in here. Now you'd see on outdoor bikes, it's much smaller than this. Now, if you're an outdoor cyclist, in my hand now is something that probably weighs about half of what your outdoor bike weighs, because it's a metal crank, and we have a big box with 2 AA batteries in it. But there's a strain gauge in here, just on a computer board that's glued to this power meter. The way that the Stages power meter measures power is it actually measures how much you are bending the crank every pedal stroke. And when we first started introducing this to people, like, I can't bend that big old 7 pounds of metal. Well, you can. So, and it's very, very accurate and sensitive. So every time you press down on it, that's why I kind of use the scale analogy. It's kind of like you're stepping on a scale.
Yeah.
It measures how much you bend the crank.
Wow.
And they do a whole bunch of math and configuration on every single crank, because every crank could be a little bit different. So it measures how much you bend the crank each time, and then how many RPM you're doing. And then it does the math to figure out what your power output is. Other ones are in the hub, and it measures, same idea, it's still a strain gauge in there, but it's measuring how much you're bending, you're moving inside of the hub. So
I had no idea that it bent.
It does bend. It's I remember, we'll go back to Pat, there used to be an app, and I might still have the app. And what he would do is, you'd go to the app and it would measure it, and he would just shake it. And you would see the app bouncing around. I mean, it wasn't a high power, but you would see it was that sensitive that you're bending it enough, even by shaking it. So it measures all of that movement. But down there's a strain gauge in here that measures how much it's bent each time. And then that's how they would do it. So they take that information from there. They
that's
shoot
the force part of it, right?
That's the force, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the force. So it measures every time every time you pedal, this is the left crank. So every time you press down on it, it measures how much it bends. I guess they call it deflection. I could be wrong on that. And then your RPM. And then they do the math to figure it out. So when it comes to that, you think it's really not that complex. It's not like, this is complex.
Yeah.
But once you figure out how much force it takes to bend it a certain bit, then you're just doing the math real quickly, or the computer's doing the math real quickly, and you figure it out. But yeah, outdoor meters come on a crank, your crank should maybe aluminum or carbon fiber.
Sure.
So they're much lighter. The outdoor meter uses a very similar board, computer chip to it, but no one wants 2 AA batteries on their $10,000 or $20,000 bike.
Right.
So you just put one of those little quarter batteries in there, and it's much smaller. Our Stages puts the AA batteries in there just so it lasts a long time.
Sure.
Otherwise, you guys would be changing batteries.
Plus, it's indoor, and
no, you're not worried about you're not going anywhere.
Right.
We used to always joke that you're riding a bike that goes nowhere. So let's not get too caught up in the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's that Stages power meter. So this is an interesting story. I was working at Greenwood Athletic Club, and we needed new bikes.
Okay.
I was a spinning instructor at the time, but also very aware of what was going on in the industry. I just kind of geeked out on it.
Yeah.
This company called Free Motion was creating a power meter bike. And they were building it in Boulder, Colorado. We're about 40 minutes south of Boulder, where we are here. So they sent me up with another guy from Greenwood Athletic Club, who was a great cyclist as well. His name was Dennis Miller. I'm Dennis Mellon. People always got us confused.
Yeah.
So we go up, and I don't know who Pat Warner is.
Okay.
But he's the guy that gives us the tour. And we're checking out this Free Motion bike that isn't even released yet. I don't know how they got our name and all that, but I heard about power, and I heard it's going to be the future of cycling and indoor cycling. So Pat's showing us a bike with a power meter on it. And I'm going to stand up for a second.
Yeah,
right?
Please do.
So this is the power meter, but we didn't know that. And this was a big secret. So Pat's like, so we walk into like their development room, right? computers everywhere, buzzing, things. It's like being in a hospital, actually. It was like a big engineering room.
Yeah.
And we walk up to the bike, and he goes, okay, now the power meter goes, it measures power down here. That's all he said. There's a big box covering all of this, right? So he goes, hop on there, and we start pedaling, and you can see the power coming up on the console. Well, little did we know that the power meter was visible, but they did this big show to hide something down here, so we thought the power meter was back there, when this was sitting right here the whole time. But the Dennis and me, Dennis, were like, oh, that's really cool, man. How are you guys measuring it? And he couldn't really get into it too much because he didn't want us to really ever comprehend that.
What was it in plain? It was in plain sight.
He wasn't hiding it at all. He put a big box back here to make it look like he was hiding it. It was like, so then when I saw him after that, years later, actually, because we didn't end up getting those bikes because they were so new. I'm like, Pat, do you remember that? I go, oh, yeah, we did that to everybody. We made it look like the power meter was over here when it was right there in front of their face the whole time.
Yeah, well, like, to this day, every once in a while, I'll be in class and I'll spit out a little information and I'll say, hey, just so you know, all the information that we're using today comes from that little block on the power meter on your left crankshaft. Just look down. Everybody's like, I didn't even know that was there. You know, so.
But they have no idea. Well, I used to teach, I still teach class. I still use this video. I use video, like you said, all the time. Yeah. And Stages used to work with Team Sky. So if you're unfamiliar with outdoor cycling, Team Sky was one of the top cycling teams in the world for a few years, and they won the Tour de France.
Using a Stages power meter.
Using a Stages power meter. So I used to use that. I would show that video of them about to win a mountain top finish.
Sure.
And be like, yeah, and if you look down on the left side of your bike, you see the little box on there? That's the power meter. Those guys are using the exact same power meter that we're using.
Yep.
And oh, really? And then, the cycling guys would come up after like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Other people are like, I don't care. I just want to see the number. But I don't care either. I just want to see the story.
I nerd out on all that stuff. One of the things that I learned about the power meter when I was fortunate enough to start training. And by the way, some of you, I've mentioned that I'm a Stages educator, and you've seen that on my videos. Well, Dennis actually mentored me in that, and he took me to, I don't know if you remember, but we went to a rec center out north. I want to say it was like something with a C, like Chasm, or I can't even remember the name. And Dennis was there when I gave my first presentation as a Stages educator.
That was in Loveland.
Loveland, yes. Okay. And we rode out there together. We chatted it up, and there were even things that I still didn't understand. And you were so gracious to say, oh, you did great, and we talked and you continued. So I have to really thank you for that.
Oh, it was great to watch you at work.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I like to teach and stuff, but you kind of filled in some blanks. I remember even in between some of the sessions, I'm like, all right, there's a slide coming up and I'm not sure I know what to say. And you just quickly, graciously explained it to me and helped me, get out of some of those tense moments. But,
well, those things are some of the stuff I'm most proud of with my time at Stages. Because when we first came out with Stages power, other companies had power too. Schwinn had a power meter. Theirs wasn't this direct measurement, which was kind of our selling point. It is now, but it wasn't then. And there was another, Kaiser had a power meter bike as well, or a power bike, not a power meter bike. Accurate enough, I'll just say that, but the Stages meters I think were better and more accurate from bike to bike. But we had to break the world into what training with power was, because everybody at that point just wanted to perceived exertion and ride to the music. Yeah. And there was no structure to it. You weren't getting anything true coaching out of it. When you got the power meter, now you could be very, very specific and people would get the feedback. So I talked a little bit about heart rate before, where not everyone would bring a heart rate monitor. So and I was all I was hot and heavy into training with heart rate, because I was doing it as I was training for triathlete. I didn't have power meter at that time. Everything was heart rate based, unless I was doing track work. Then I was following my friend Dr. Jack Daniels. I was doing that kind of work on the track, but otherwise everything was heart rate based and perceived exertion based. Now we had something that gave you output, and the beauty of this is might be in a class that you wanted to be a heart rate class, but only 10 of the 50 people had heart rate monitors. Now You
Everybody
stepped
had
into
one
a
of those.
class and everyone had this thing
Yes.
on their bike with output on a console. So now you're like, oh, now I can get you to do what you wanted. And then when people started
Yes.
realizing the feedback they would get and the way you could coach it, simply, we're talking about zones and all. You don't even have to do that. You could just say, we're going to go for 1 minute, get your average wattage, do more on the next one, do more on the next one. So you could just give them that kind of feedback, which was always great fun.
Man, that's so cool. Just
But
to
getting
hear that whole
those people,
history.
getting instructors to buy in, getting members to buy in, was difficult at first.
Yeah.
And where you're even talking about being confused about, anything power, and you're at this level. Just imagine what people down here were trying to get. So we tried not to make it too complicated.
Sure.
We tried to make it simple. Here's just some numbers. That's what you did. Can you do more or less, or things like that? So
well, it's such a great way to train, and it really does. One of the terms that I like to use is energy management. Like, how are we managing our energy on this bike to reach the goal that's in front of us?
for sure.
And so it's one of the things that sometimes I'll walk into a class and the instructor will be just like, go, add, turn. And I'm just like, add how much, turn how much, and for how long? Because I'm already burnt out and we just started, like it's one of those things where, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so big on my channel, for my YouTube classes with information. I like to display like, the RPE, or if it's a zone class, what zone, if it's a heart rate based, what heart rate, and then have a clock that says, all right, we're at this place for this amount of time, and here's the cadence. If it's RPM based, if not, give them a window of what the cadence should be. It's the reason why I'm so big on that, because otherwise, how do you manage your energy? Like, how in the world am I going to get through this if you're not really telling me how to use my energy, or you're giving me like these huge efforts up front, but the class is an hour long. Like, I'm going to be spent in the first 10 minutes.
That's why people like CrossFit.
Yeah.
They like CrossFit because of, the community. There's a lot of things about it, but what people say they like also is that it's written on the board or on the mirror. There's the workout. They walk up to it and they look at it. They kind of judge where they're going to how they're going to dose their output. There might be some efforts that are not, or some exercises that are not their strength. So, I'm going to save a little bit for that. And that's what I think we need to do as well. You can always say it. You can verbalize it. We're going to do we're going to do, and you kind of talk them through just a big overview of what it is. But with the group displays that we've been using, you can put the whole plan on the bottom of the screen. It's like a different language at first, but they decipher it so quickly. Oh, those reds, there's a lot of reds today. Okay, I better not go over and above. I'm going to go just enough to do that zone 5, that red, that breathless zone. But I'm not going to do anything extra until maybe the end if I have anything left. So, so I think that helps so much. I've always had, way back, we were kind of talking about the progression and what I've done. I started using videos a long, long time ago, wheeling in the big tube TVs. I mean, it was like, and I would have it on a VHS tape.
On a cart?
Yes, it was a cart with a VHS
crazy.
tape. That's almost as bad.
That reminds me of like middle school when the instructor, or when the teacher would come in to, it was movie day. They brought it in on a cart, VHS player.
Exactly like that.
Crazy.
And I would try to plug the TV into the stereo.
You were doing this way before anybody. That's crazy.
But then I started.
You heard it here first.
Yes. I started mapping out, even if it was just, you're talking about, remember the little, the dry erase pencil or pens that they would use on the overheads on those, I don't know what that piece of plastic. You know what I'm talking about, though?
Oh man, it slips my mind now.
I used to do stuff like that too. I had the workouts on these little. My wife's a teacher, so I had all this stuff at my disposal. So
they were like the transparent.
So I'd write the workout up on that, and put that up on the board, and pull it away. Like, okay, you guys got it. Now we're moving on to the next thing. So I'm running around using. It's just things.
So like you were using that, schools were using that, churches were using that. You were kind of following that same.
People wanted to know what was going, what was coming, and I wasn't going to make copies of it, but people wanted to know. Like, I got so many compliments about that cool, now I know what's coming. I think that is so important for people, as opposed to, you'd never show up for a race, or maybe you would, but you would have to really manage your output, where someone says, okay, there is the start line, And I don't know I'm not going to tell you where the finish line is.
Yeah, no one would race that.
Ready,
no one
go.
No one want to be part of that.
So,
And I think here's the thing too, and which is why I never really understood. We can start wrapping it up too, but why I never understood instructors who just go do. We all intuitively, without thinking about it, know how to manage our energy, or our body's going to manage it for us. Right. So if you think about when we were younger, when you would go out all night and then you would have to, work the next day, well, your energy is kind of all over the place.
Right.
You get a little older, and at least for me, I'm like, it's 9 o'clock. If I don't go to bed now, it's not going to go good for me in the morning. And that's really me managing my energy.
Yep.
That's me saying I need to recover.
Right.
Because I had this go on during my day, or I have to get up at this time in the morning, and I know I need X amount of hours to sleep, right? And so we all do it in different ways, right? Oh, the new mom, she's carrying her newborn baby, and after a while that burns, right?
Yep.
And so they switch hands, but they're not going to drop the baby,
right?
But they manage how they swap and
sure.
the amount, and then sometimes they put the cradle down, or why am I forgetting the name? But the carrier down, and so we do it in every part of life,
right?
We manage energy rather.
Well, that's where the power comes in, because exercise science tells us how long.
Right.
We can hold each zone.
There you go.
And how long we need recovery afterward.
You can carry your baby for up to an hour. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then those moms just get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
So the baby gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's pretty amazing.
So I'm always amazed when I see women carrying, like, I don't know, the way they can put the bigger kids on their hip and just sit there. I'm like, I can't do that.
Well, they got like the diaper bag here. They got the carrier
all
here.
Balanced out.
They have the hand of the kid who can walk here while they're carrying, and they're just doing it. Do you need help?
Amazing.
No, I got this.
I'm locked in. Yep.
Yeah.
But we have
stamina, endurance. It's like, what is going on right
So
now?
as instructors, it's our responsibility, especially if you're training with like a group display system and people know their FTP, to set up programs and plans that are physiologically possible to do. Yeah. And the science is there. And if you ever took a stages training, we've told you that as well. Yeah. So we need to be careful with that. It can't all be HIIT all the time.
Right.
You can do HIIT, but HIIT has to have the low end too to recover from it. And managing that, you're 100% right. So we know what you can do. It's the same for each person. I mean, of course, there's outliers, but so it's the responsibility of the coach.
If a coach does overdo it, I'm going to self-manage anyway, because I can't do that anyway.
The ghost turn.
Yeah, it's going to be.
I'm going to fake that turn.
Yeah, yep.
I'm going to fake that turn, or I'm going to sandbag the FTP, because I know you set up impossible workouts. So when we do that FTP test at the beginning, I'm not going to go as hard as you're telling me to, because I've seen the workout that you put together for me. I know I can't do that, so I'm going to manage my energy.
Self-manage it,
just the way you were talking about.
Yeah. This has been great. Like we could easily continue this conversation for hours. Definitely have to do another episode.
I'd love to.
This is so much fun. I mean, again, as I was sharing with you in the beginning, my heart is to bring people such as yourself into a room or via on video on a call and just dive into your brain a little bit. What makes you passionate about cycling? What is information that we should know? Why do we do what we do? And I just can't thank you enough. Like, not only for what you've invested into me, but even being here today. Like, I'm super honored, and I mean that like sincerely. This is great. This is great.
Joe, you're amazing. So you just need to know that. I think too often we don't take compliments well, but it's been I remember that class you came to at Lifetime, and you were like, oh.
Well, because I kept you after for
but it was like, here's a new toy or a new tool that I can play with. I didn't know how to use it before, but now I have an idea on how to use it. It's like watching something on TikTok or or YouTube, like, oh, I didn't know you could make that, that kind of thing. Like, oh, that's not even that hard, but I had no one ever show me how to do it. So, and I could see you kind of light up with that. And then I think I took your class like a month later, and I was like, oh my God, I mean, I don't think it's that complex. I don't think it's that hard, but some people do, but you just got it. And,
thank you.
And I still use this. I remember when you did this a few times when you were playing around. This was just like as an instructor. I mean, I like to think of myself this way anyway, that I'm always trying to learn. And I think everybody, even an instructor that may not be that strong, I could still learn from.
Yeah.
They're going to say something, they're going to do something like, oh, I'm taking that. They could play an awesome song. I didn't hear that song, but I'm using that. Or they play a song you never thought would work, and they sold it. I'm like, oh, I've listened to the song 1,000 times, but I never really thought to use it in class. So you can always learn something. And you did something that was just so you, it was funny. I laughed, and I still use it every so often, where we have the sprint shift lever.
Yeah.
And the old levers used to be, they were silver, or they were chrome or aluminum, so they were louder when you clicked them. Yeah. And you used to have them like on the last beat, or like the cymbal smash, turn it off when you hear the cymbal smash, so it sounded like you were a drummer or something. It was just fun. It also kept people from turning it off early, right? So I was like, oh, that was so brilliant and so fun. And then when you do it, you can hear people really starting to focus on the music then, and you try to get them all within like a fraction of a second. So that kind of stuff was great.
Thank you.
But then the way that you, back when you were using video as well, just the way that's progressed so much, and just the way it's like, and then we would talk back and forth on different ways to do it, and how to make it happen. So
we always had like this idea factory going on.
Right. And how can I say outdo, I don't mean it that way, but I know like you show me something and then the ideas just go in my head and I move on. Then you see what I've done, and I have twins, and that's how they always kind of work too. I was like, yes, so Joe's doing this. Okay, I'm going to do that too. That's a great idea. I don't mean it like I got to outdo you, but then like, oh, and then all of a sudden your mind just...
No, we just learn from one another. We take cueing from one another. We get inspired from one. I mean, there's just like, it's just endless. It's endless. So
I was just really glad to have you on that team at Stages, and still be working with it. Now look what you're doing. So
it's again, my heart is to help people, to highlight people, and of course, I'm going to put all your information in the description below. Would love for somebody of you to go check out a live ride on you what do you call it? Stream some of your rides too. And so of course you have plenty of content and all that. And if you want to see a great a master way of seeing power taught, you gotta take Dennis's class. We'll put all that in the description. Dennis, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you, man.
Great being here.
Until the next one.
Yes, let's do this again.
All right.
For sure.
All right.
We should share some of our video content with each other's sites too. We should kind of think about that. So it would be good for other people to see other ways to do it.
Yes.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for listening.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.